Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Mei Lee Show. We've been doing this for a couple weeks now, and I hope the response has been good. I think it has been really good, but I will confess, we are recording a lot of these things before we actually roll the show out. So we've done one teaser episode that we've introduced, and the response has been really great, actually. And the whole point of this show, as I've been saying, is about empowering the Asian American community, having a platform where we can all speak up about things we care about, issues we care about, people we care about, and really elevate our presence, elevate our identity, and really create a movement. And I think that's what we've been seeing happen in the last few years. And it's really starting to snowball, I think, into one that is not going to dissipate. In the past, I've seen it blip out and then just go away. This time, I really feel like it's a sustainable movement for the Asian American community. And more importantly, it's really about empowering just voices of those who maybe felt left out for a long time, didn't have a voice, didn't have an identity, felt like they were invisible. And this is a way to kind of showcase what we are, who we are, what we're doing in the community and in the broader community. And I love the fact that I'm hearing from people who, they're not Asian, you know, they have no sort of connection to the community, but they are being moved by what they're hearing and they're learning something. And that's what it's all about. It's all about educating. I would be remiss, actually, before I start the show, not to mention something. As I said, we record these shows. It is January 27th, 2020. And yesterday, here in LA, we got some really terrible news about Kobe Bryant. Some of you might be basketball fans, some of you might not be, but Kobe Bryant was a legend. And he and his 13-year-old daughter, Gigi, and 7 other people were killed in a helicopter accident. And this city right now, there's definitely a dark cloud hanging over LA and the country and the world. And let's remember, Kobe had an intense influence on Asia. He was a hero. He was looked up to. I remember covering a couple of stories, his last game, for instance. Chinese had flown in from China, paid thousands of dollars for a ticket. And they said that they grew up with him and they found him so inspirational and motivational. And so, you know, I just feel like I just need to say something about that because it's sad when you hear about any death. It's terribly sad and heartbreaking when somebody's taken so instantly and violently. And so my condolences to his family and to all those who felt some attachment to him and the work that he did. And he was in the second chapter of his life, which makes it even sadder. He was really growing into something different. And he was all about empowering women and girls. He had 4 daughters. He has 4 daughters. Unfortunately, one of his daughters did pass away with him in that helicopter. But he was all about giving a voice and elevating women and girls. And so I think that's a perfect segue to my next guest. Shiza Shahid. I know, I just asked her before the show. I'm like, I want to say your name correctly. And she said it. And of course, I just screwed it up. Anyway, Shiza, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm
Great
honored
to have you here. Shiza, if you don't know, she is quite a well-known activist. And I use that segue into women and girls because her entire life, since she was a teenager, you have been involved in trying to bring more justice and more education and more empowerment to women and girls, having grown up in Pakistan, correct? I did research on you and I was like, wow, this is a girl who grew up, you know, in Pakistan, saw these needs, got involved young, then continued to do the work. And of course, we're going to talk about how you got involved with Malala and her fund. But tell me, what was it about you at such a young age that inspired you to go out and be like, you know what, I'm going to start helping girls and women, even though you were still a girl at that time?
I think when you're young and you show up and you realize you can make a difference, you learn not to doubt yourself. And I think I had that privilege that I learned to show up at a young age and I learned what an impact that can have. I think a lot of other people are sort of held back by parents, school, it's not the right time. Focus on your studies, get an education, get a good job, and eventually maybe, later in life or on the side, you'll get to make a difference. And by that point, you've internalized this sense of, well, it's not my place. It's not my place to show up. It's not my place to help.
Or I can't make a difference.
I can't make a difference.
Yeah.
I believe inherently people are good and empathetic and they care. But I think they learn that their voice doesn't matter. And I was fortunate to not learn that.
Did that come from your parents? It had to come from somewhere.
I think it came from my set of experiences. I am fortunate. I grew up in a loving home in the capital of Pakistan. I had a good education, but I was also growing up in a country with many social challenges.
Right.
Pakistan has the second highest number of children out of school in the entire world. It is ranked the second worst place to be born a woman. And that doesn't mean all women in Pakistan are oppressed. We have some incredible women activists, athletes, CEOs. But it was clear to me that my situation was different, that I had a lot more than most girls around me. And I was honestly curious. I wanted to understand it. I wanted to understand why the world could be so unjust. And so I did the only thing I could think of. I began showing up at the doors of nonprofits as a 13-year-old and asking them to let me volunteer. And they would. And one experience led to another. And I worked in women's prisons and refugee camps and natural disaster relief. And I organized protests, and I learned how to use my voice and tell stories on the media. And that was my childhood. And it was this very impassioned adolescence that taught me that my voice matters.
At that time, you were about 13, 14 years old. And I know you're saying that you felt this, but really, I mean, the average 13, 14-year-old doesn't feel this way because they're still going through puberty and trying to figure out their own dang life, right? So I'm so curious, what went in your mind, or was it something you felt in your heart? What was it?
I think it was, that first time, the very first volunteer opportunity I had was carrying medical supplies for a nonprofit that would create medical camps for women who were in prison. And at that particular prison, Adiala jail is what it's called. At the time, there were no female physicians, and many of the women would not come forward if they were unwell. So this charity was providing medical relief and medical supplies. And, I was just there holding the boxes of medication, and I would get to interact with the women. And there were lots of little children in that jail. I would later come to learn that women were, particularly if they gave birth in the prison, but even otherwise sometimes allowed to keep their children if there wasn't anywhere else for them to go.
Right.
And so I was seeing these, 2-year-olds who had been literally born in prison, and getting to know them and getting to know their stories, and seeing them not just as victims, but just as people with a unique set of circumstances that was different from my own, and who perhaps had just been a little bit less lucky than I had been in terms of where they were born and the support network and opportunities that they had. And I was aware of that. And, when you help someone, when you feel like maybe you've helped someone, it's a really incredible feeling. And the first time you feel that, that you matter, your actions matter. I think in many ways, those angsty teenagers, that's what they're looking for, this sense of belonging and of mattering. And they're looking for it in, their cliques and their romances and their outfits. And I was in a small town in a class of 12 students and wasn't getting the kind of intellectual stimulation that I craved at school. And I started to explore the outside world, and I fell into helping. And once I felt what it meant to help one person, I knew that was where I could find the sense of belonging. So
it's almost as if you found your calling during this time of doing this kind of volunteer work. You seem to have found something that resonated with you deeper than obviously just going to school and caring about your clothes and things like that.
I mean, I also have my vanity. I won't say that I transformed into the Buddha, but I did realize that you could create a life of meaning, and that came from feeling like you were contributing to something larger than yourself.
Well, here's the thing. So a lot of folks might go through a phase, right? Whether they're a child or an adult, and then it goes away. they sort of get on with their lives, right? That's why moments of tragedy and crisis, people get on the bandwagon, but then, it kind of disappears, right? For you, you have committed your life to doing this good in the world, social justice, empowering women and girls, social entrepreneurialism. So this is something that you have stuck with throughout your career. You're still young, but this is obviously something that is deeper and more meaningful to you.
Absolutely. And I think, I started out as a teenager in Pakistan, looking to understand my society, looking to belong, looking to find meaning. Mm-hmm. And as I grew, opportunities came my way, but also tragedies came my way. And it was often sort of a set of circumstances where I would be in this moment and think, well, what is the most impactful thing I can do in this moment? Mm-hmm. And sometimes that was organizing a protest, and sometimes that was starting a nonprofit, and now it's investing in mission-driven startups and starting a company, and understanding how you can have an impact through a business that actually scales.
Right.
But I think I've also learned that there's a false dichotomy that's often presented to people, the sense that you can have a fast-paced career, you can build something big, or you can make an impact. Mm-hmm. That an impact can only happen in a grassroots way or through a nonprofit model.
Yeah, it's either or.
Right.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Or you put in your time, you make your money, and then you get to volunteer.
Right.
And I think I learned at a young age that wasn't the case, that if you could challenge some of these business models, these assumptions, these policies, you could bring the two together and have a real impact and shift the role of business, of industry, of finance.
We're starting to see that movement, right, with corporations and startups that are a little bit more socially conscious of doing good as well as making money, right? And oftentimes now you hear people saying, listen, we're a company that is for profit, but we also want to be responsible, right? So does that give you hope that you're hearing more of that? You're seeing more of that? At least in my lifetime, I'm starting to definitely see more of that.
I'm an optimistic person.
You are? Okay,
what I say is every choice is an opportunity, right? Yeah. In my most recent venture, our place, a home goods and kitchenware brand, every decision we're making, we're asking, is there a way to do this so that it's better for the world? So, okay, we have this cookware. Can we source it from a female-owned factory? Okay, we're packaging this cookware. Can we remove all the plastics from our packaging? What would that look like? And okay, it's going to take a little bit longer and it's going to be a little bit more expensive. But, my team who's working on it is far more inspired and motivated. My customers who now learn about this are far more loyal.
Yeah. Yep.
And so everything you do in a business presents a choice. And yes, you have to balance the demands of growing a business, but I believe that it's not mutually exclusive. And if you strike that balance, then you hit at a point where you can build a brand, a company, a fund that truly endures.
Yeah. Yeah. We're going to talk about Our Place in a second because you're going to actually show us one of the products. But let's go back then. So you are already at a young age, very aware of, the unfairness of the world and injustice and people who really do need help. You're willing to get in there, get your hands dirty and do the work. You go off to Stanford on full scholarship. So you come to America and to study, but you're still very attached to the idea of giving back and putting your time into that. And then you see Malala. Did you see video of her or something as a young girl?
Yes.
Right? And as most of you should know, Malala is the young woman who at a very young age was quite an activist when it came to women and girls education in Pakistan. And then unfortunately she was shot by the Taliban. She survived and went on to continue to do her work. But before she became even bigger, you noticed her and you said, man, I need to meet her. I need to work with her. What happened?
I had gotten the scholarship to Stanford, as you mentioned. And so once again, I felt very lucky. Here I was, this middle-class South Asian girl. And now
obviously very smart since you got a scholarship to Stanford.
Well, very, very fortunate. There's a lot of people smarter than me who probably, didn't. So the universe has been generous so far. I had all this opportunity now, all this access. I was in a class of 20 students with Condoleezza Rice the year she left office, right? So now I'm surrounded by professors who are so connected and students who are so connected. And yet in my home country, there's so much that's happening that people in America don't even know about, don't even talk about. And one of those issues was the Swat Valley, the town that Malala had grown up in, which is a lot more remote than my hometown, the capital, Islamabad. That town had been taken over in an armed insurgency by a group linked to the Taliban. And this group became extremely violent, began to blow up girls' schools. In January 2009, declared an all-out ban on female education. So for me, here I was, getting this incredible education. Less than 300 miles from where I grew up, girls were being told they couldn't go to school.
And you're thinking, this is such a stark difference from my life right now.
Such a stark difference.
Yeah.
And why don't more people know about this?
Right.
Why do my classmates not know this is happening? And it was because this was a faraway place in a faraway country that, Americans don't know exists most of the time. And those in the Swat Valley, particularly schoolgirls who were being denied their education, they were already from a fairly remote part of Pakistan. So they were barely connected to sort of the stakeholders, the people with influence within the country who could act to change things, let alone, the people who could make a difference globally. And I thought, well, I can be that bridge. So I went back to Pakistan.
But again, Shiza, I mean, that's pretty bold for you to all of a sudden just see this happening and say, you know what, I'm going to make a difference. A lot of folks wouldn't do that, right? You're in your cushy situation at Stanford on full scholarship. You could have said, oh, this is too bad. But you said, no, I'm going to do something.
Yeah, I think it was that fire in the belly again, the sense of, okay, I'm at Stanford, I have all of this and, it's great, but I don't feel like I'm doing anything meaningful in this moment, right? Okay. I'm writing these essays and great, I got an A. Is anyone going to read them?
Right.
Are they going to change anything?
Right.
So what's the point? What's the point of all of this privilege if I'm just going to stay
in your bubble and not do much. Okay. Got it.
And also it's just a deep sense of anger, I think, of how does this happen in 2009 was the year. How does this happen in 2009? And maybe there was a little bit, I say I'm a serial shower-upper. Like I just show up into situations where I feel like maybe I can make a difference. Yeah. And so I just decide to show up, and sometimes it works out. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't.
In this case, it did.
Those are the stories you don't hear about. Yeah. Right? But so I went and I created this summer camp, and I found Malala and her father. Her father was this, wonderful man who ran a school in the Swat Valley. And so they became my partners in this venture. I asked them to help me find girls, including Malala, like Malala, who wanted to share their stories. And I said that I would create this camp to give them, the tools, the resources, the mentors, the exposure that would ensure that those stories were heard and actually made a difference. So that was how we met. She was shot 4 years later. And of course it was personally very devastating. And that really sort of turned my life upside down once again when I decided to, I'd graduated from Stanford. I'd gotten my first job out of college at McKinsey, which, at the time was the top business consulting firm in the world. I had a plan, which was, do the McKinsey program, go to a fancy business school, and then finally, maybe build a mission-driven business or fund. But about a year into that plan, Malala was shot, and I felt that I had to be there. And
you were in the UK when she was flown to the UK for more treatment, right? I came to the UK after
she was flown over.
So you saw her a couple of weeks after she was shot, right?
Yeah, so my mother was there right after she was shot in Pakistan. I was in Egypt, so I was able to be on the phone with her parents instantly and sort of get current news on what was happening and see if there was anything I could do. And then when she was airlifted for treatment, her parents asked me to fly in. And, thankfully, miraculously, she recovered.
It really was a miracle, wasn't it?
It really was. It really was.
Because I think at that time, it was very touch and go, and people were, I think even the doctors told you that there was a very low chance of her recovery, right?
That type of trauma for anyone it was a devastating time, but, it was miraculous that she recovered, made a near full recovery, is doing really well, is thriving, and
went on to win the Nobel Peace Prize, the youngest, the youngest recipient ever.
Does.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. But I know that they started this Malala Fund, and they really wanted you to be part of it. With a lot of coaxing, you finally did end up joining them to be a co-founder.
Yes, so I moved to New York with a suitcase, became co-founder, but also founding CEO. So really built the organization at the beginning, and it was a really incredible journey. I know we're on a podcast talking about Asian culture, Asian identity. I think for a girl like Malala, who is Asian, as am I, I feel like her story, the stories of girls from that part of the world are often told in a very specific way through the lens of a Western journalist. And it's often the story of a victim. And that's not Malala's story.
Yeah.
It's not my story. That's not the story of the girls and the women who are working on these issues.
Right.
And this was a story that we really sort of allowed to be told in her own words. And it became the story of a change maker, of a Nobel Peace Prize winner.
And you really were able to create this incredible movement that was, I hate to say it this way, and I don't mean any disrespect, but the brand of Malala meant so much because it was about a powerful young woman speaking up and defending, girls and women in Pakistan and beyond from the oppression and, the justice that they deserve and the education, the basic education that they weren't getting. So I love the fact that you said that about Asian girls and women. Oftentimes, we are seen in this box, right, of this defined characteristic from outsiders. And it's great when you can tell your own story and control that narrative.
Absolutely.
What was that like for you? That must have been a powerful feeling to be able to control that narrative and to change it.
I think that, the power of storytelling was really something that I learned doing that work. I'd always sort of been a storyteller, but I had been a storyteller in South Asia. And now I was a storyteller in the United States, in the United Kingdom, sort of in many ways globally.
Right.
And there is something incredibly powerful about a single story. We understand the statistics. There's 130 million girls out of school in the entire world, but a single story can capture our imagination. And I think we were able to share that story and then drive real change around that story.
Right.
And it's something that I continue to try and do today. It's really shift stereotypes about
those stereotypes. Yeah.
Right.
I think the beauty of Malala's story, like you're saying, is that sometimes when you talk about a subject or topic that's kind of broad, like girls' education, there's no face to that. It's just a topic that is so general that people can't sink their teeth into it. But when you then make it a singular story about an individual, and there's a face to that individual, there's a story about her background and her upbringing and her fight, that makes it much more tangible, makes it easier to swallow, and it's much more palpable for people. And that's the beauty of storytelling. As a journalist, I always say to people, everyone has a story. I don't care if you're a street sweeper or if you're a prime minister, everyone has a story. You just have to get to the heart of that story. And that is what you guys obviously did with Malala and the fund. So tell me then from there, that obviously, it took off and people really joined the bandwagon. And then you decided to move on to create a venture, Now Ventures, to help other social entrepreneurs, right?
Yes. With Malala's shooting, I had been really pulled back into the nonprofit space. And I believe nonprofits are incredibly important. But I had been on this path to start to look at business and startups and tech as a way to make an impact. You know, I'd grown up seeing nonprofits in Pakistan, which some of them do really important work. A lot of them are very dependent on external sources of funding and US aid, and it can create some real systemic challenges.
Sure.
And my first two experiences in life were, you know, grassroots poverty alleviation work and then startups in tech at Stanford, right?
Okay.
Surrounded by startups in tech
Right.
at 18, you know, as soon as I left Pakistan. And I wanted to bring those two worlds together. I'd also been, you know, pulled back into building something in the United States with the Malala Fund. And it was very much for me a choice that I made out of love, a desire to protect Malala, her family, to support, to help, to show up.
Right.
And once I knew that she was safe and healthy, the Malala Fund was now, you know, an established, growing organization. I looked around me at sort of the other people that I admired, and very often they were social entrepreneurs, women, people of color, building companies, struggling to get funding. You know, the VC landscape is very inequitable. 2% of all venture funding goes to women.
Oh, wow. Is it that low?
It's about as low as it can be.
Yeah. And, you know, I mean, look, there's a crass way to look at it, of course, with the VC world and the tech world. They just want a quick exit, right? They just care about the bottom line and how much money they're going to make. And so there is a level of coldness and, you know, total inequity.
Right. Absolutely. And even from that crass line, women can make money, you know, women make great CEOs. And we have, you know, study after study that shows when you have women on your board or women in leadership positions, you're more likely to outperform financially. And
why don't businesses get that still though? Is it just programming that people need to be reprogrammed? Is it time? We just need more time.
I think it's complicated. I think it depends on the industry, you know, but a lot of these issues run really deep, right? So one of my favorite studies on bias is around the Boston Symphony Orchestra. So I want to say 1965, the Boston Symphony Orchestra realized, you know, we don't have many women on the orchestra, and maybe bias is playing into this. So when they had their auditions, they had everyone audition behind a screen.
The blind auditions. Yep.
And they were like, okay, let's see the results. They saw the results. It was still male. And they were like, okay, what's going on? So at this point, they could have said, well, we had everyone audition. It's still predominantly male. The women just aren't good enough. But then it occurred to someone, wait a second. What if we had everyone take off their shoes as we walked on stage? Because when the women walked on stage, they were wearing heels. So they ran it again. They put everyone behind a screen.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
And they had them remove their shoes.
Yeah.
And this time it ended up 50-50.
Oh my gosh.
So the thing about bias is it runs deep.
Yeah.
You know, people get very scared of the word bias. Bias is normal. We
It's
all
normal.
have it. I have bias.
Absolutely. We
I
all
work
do.
on it all the time,
Yep.
but I have bias. It's just how our brain organizes a tremendous amount of information it's confronted with. We organize into patterns.
Yeah.
And working to unravel that requires a deep amount of thought. It requires changes in the education system and how we raise our daughters and how we raise our sons and how we run our companies and how we hire and how we promote.
And it's people like you and your, you know, Now Ventures, which is tries to focus on more female oriented businesses and startups and entrepreneurs, right? I mean,
absolutely.
We still need that leg up. I mean, let's be honest. It's still not equitable. There's still,
and I don't call my fund a diversity fund. You know, there's other funds that will solely invest in women or people of color. I think they're doing really important work. But for me, I said, I'm just going to invest in the best businesses I see that also make the world better, but are great businesses. They're going to make money and they're going to do good. Because otherwise, what's the point if we make a ton of money and the planet self-destructs? Right.
Yep.
So let's find that combination of great business, great impact. And I ended up with an 80% female founded portfolio because as a woman, as a person of color, as an Asian, guess who my network is? Other awesome women building great businesses.
And there's a lot of us out there.
There really are. And just like my network is predominantly female, the fact that most capital is controlled by men and their networks are primarily male does factor in. And so when men say, well, I can't find the women, it's because you went to Yale and you rode you rode in crew and
Yeah,
you
and
were in a fraternity,
frat,
right?
Yeah, exactly.
So of course you don't know the women. You've got to put more women in control of the capital,
right?
Because they do know the women.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. And like you shared the statistics of successful businesses that have more women and have more women on their boards and executives. I mean, hopefully that's going to start changing even more so. I mean, it's like what's happening in Hollywood, right? It's the whole Me Too movement of saying enough is enough. We can't take this anymore. We're not going to be sidelined. We're not going to be silenced. We're not going to be controlled this way. So we are seeing it throughout sort of different societal areas of change, right? Still a long way to go. But for you, again, committed to pushing this change, and especially within the Asian community, I think that's something that I often talk about. We still have a lot of tradition. I don't know if your family, you grew up with a lot of tradition. I certainly did as a Korean American. And that's hard to break away from. And that's a hard mentality to change as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I guess I'm fortunate. I try not to see myself as a victim of the culture. I try to see the culture in a nuanced way, right? So yes, my mother didn't get to go to pursue higher education. She's brilliant. She was married to my father when she was 19. Met him for the
day
first
of the
time
wedding, right?
On their wedding day.
Yeah.
But my mother is also one of the most powerful women I know. She has a happy marriage. She now runs an orphanage for 130 children. She's one of the most fulfilled women I have ever met at her age. She has a tremendous amount of power. She wears a headscarf, which many in America choose as a sign of oppression, but it was something she chose. My father actually didn't want her to wear the headscarf. She said, this is something that I want to do as a sign of my devotion to my identity and my God, and I'm going to do it. And she also, has a lot of authority and power in her role as a mother, right? Which I think is often overlooked in American culture, and how our cultures really elevate and respect mothers, and how women come into a lot of power in their role as a mother. So, I am the first to say there are many challenges in our cultures, in all of our cultures, but there are also many sources of power and strength and beauty and dignity. Yeah. And also in Western culture, in American culture, there are so many ways in which women are also disempowered. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So there are hurdles to overcome. But I think that, I say this because, we're on a show that is heard in America. I think this viewpoint by many Western feminists, or just Western individuals in general, that, women from my part of the world are oppressed, and that they're painted with that brush.
Oh yeah, the sweeping generality
is also quite inaccurate.
Right. Again, stereotypes. Right.
Absolutely.
It's the stereotypes that can really create such huge obstacles where people can't get around them, can't see beyond them, aren't willing. I got into a huge Facebook fight with somebody yesterday. I don't even know them. I know. I couldn't help myself because it's frustrating to me in this day and age that you still see such narrow-mindedness and an unwillingness to even educate themselves or even listen to something that, goes not even against their beliefs. They don't even see it. They don't want to see it. And for me, because I'm a journalist, all about information and proper information and storytelling, and also, broadening people's scope, it's really frustrating for me to see that happening even more so now. And we all know what I'm talking about. I'm curious about you because I know how I feel about what's happening in this country and the world. It seems like there's a lot more divisiveness. There's a lot more separation. There's a lot more cruelty going on openly. And some days I get really just like, I don't know what to do. Right. Yeah. And I know a lot of people feel this way, this frustration of like, I just don't, I give up. Right. And I think that happens to the best of us. You said you're an eternal optimist, but there must be days where you're like, wow, there's some bad stuff going on.
There are days when I'm heartbroken. I'm an immigrant. I am a Muslim. I'm a woman. I'm a person of color. I'm a Pakistani, right? So For many Americans, I am the definition of the other.
Yep.
And I came to this country, I want to say right as President Obama was being elected. And there was a sense of, you know, my part of the world had really suffered under the policies of the Bush administration and the sort of instability and violence and terrorism that unleashed in South Asia and the Middle East. And now, you know, we had President Obama coming in and hope and optimism and change.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I came back to this country right as Trump was elected, and it felt like we had gone so far backwards, and we were now sort of appealing to and celebrating the worst tendencies within ourselves, and I felt like I had to do something, and that really led me to what I'm working on now, this cookware company, Our Place. And the name really comes from this question of what is our place? You know,
like that.
Who is welcome at our place?
Right.
What is the place of women, of immigrants, of Muslims, of people of color, of all of us who've been othered, right? And the reason we chose home cooking was, you know, in part because I love bringing people together. And the reason, you know, the way that I found my place in America was by gathering people and cooking them food from my culture so they would know who I am and sharing stories.
Well, food is so universal, gathering around a table, you know, to share a meal.
It's
That's
so universal,
the one way.
and it's also so solid, you know, when I think about culture, right? So you know, you look at people who immigrate to this country and they stop wearing perhaps their cultural dress, and now they're more likely to wear jeans, and now perhaps they're more fluent in English than their native tongue.
Right.
And now perhaps they're spending less time going to church or mosque or synagogue and becoming slightly less religious. But you go into their homes, you go into our homes, and you don't just know who they are, you know who their grandmother was or is. Right?
Through the food.
It is always, you know, the food. And that is where culture and dignity and story lives when everything else has sort of fallen away or become less important.
You know what? I've never thought of it that way, honestly, about all the other aspects of tradition and culture that may fade a little bit. But you're right. When it comes to your culture and your food, I still know what my grandmother's food tastes like. My mother still cooks Korean food, and I know exactly what that's going to be like, that experience. Yeah. So I love that concept. That's how you created Our Place then.
That's how I created Our Place with my co-founders. And, you know, it's interesting because we were talking about storytelling and brands and businesses that do good. And as I looked at the cookware industry, as I was starting to cook more and build a home here in Los Angeles, it was so misrepresentative of culture. You know, you go to the Instagrams and the websites and the storefronts of major cookware retailers, and what are they celebrating? Italian food.
Yes.
French food. Right? Are they ever
American
writing?
pizza, you know, stuff like that. Yes, you're right.
I don't think a single major retailer has ever written about Pakistani food.
Right.
Let alone called it elevated or, you know, something that you should have on a celebratory occasion.
Right.
And I thought, well, what an opportunity to tell stories in collaboration with communities, to create products around traditions, and through the lens of food, to put a nuanced spotlight on who we are.
You're so right. I never even thought about that. Specialized cookware for your different ethnic cuisines, you do not find in the mainstream. So for us, you know, Asian cooking, you have to go to like an Asian market or store to get those kinds of things. So with Our Place, you're trying to bring it a little bit more to the mainstream, or is it more still towards that particular ethnic group? So
we do two things. So we're a brand that that is speaking to all of America. So we're a brand that wants to be, we have our story, our voice that's specific, but we're speaking to all of America. We're definitely not targeting a niche market. However, we do two things. We create essentials. So everything that your kitchen needs, sort of streamlined, sourced in a sustainable, ethical way, innovated upon so that, you know, you don't have tons of clutter, beautifully designed. So you don't want to put it away. You just sort of leave it out on your stovetop. So we create these essentials that is everything that you need, regardless of your ethnicity, and it works for all cuisines. And then we find moments in the year that are big home cooking celebrations. And we partner with communities that celebrate those traditions, and we work with them from start to finish to create a series of products and stories that we then release into the world.
So the real sense of authenticity then.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we did a collaboration with Mexican Americans around Christmas. We celebrated Noche Buena, which literally is, the good night, the night before Christmas, the major celebration for Mexican Americans at Christmas time. And, the thinking was, we're going to do something for Christmas like every cookware brand, but does it have to be mashed potato and apple pie?
Yeah.
There are so many ways in which Americans celebrate Christmas. Why do we only know one lens? And so we sourced beautiful handcrafted products from Mexico, from Oaxaca, because we always try and source our products from the country of origin.
Okay.
We worked with the Mexican artist to design all of the collateral, the packaging, the inserts, everything that we wrote. We worked with a Mexican American cast and crew to share stories of Mexican families living in Los Angeles. And then we gave back to IMDEF, which is a nonprofit that's working to keep families together under the current immigration policies.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we just launched our second celebratory assortment around Lunar New Year.
Yeah.
And for that, we, went in specifically to the Chinese American lens because, we're very sensitive to the fact that people lump all Asians together.
Yep, that's right. I know. It's so funny. Like when people say Happy Chinese New Year, I'm like, well, you should really say Happy Lunar New Year because it's celebrated in China and Korea and Vietnam and all these other places.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
So, and for us, it's have the courage to be specific. So many brands just want to lower it to the
lowest common denominator.
Right.
Yeah,
exactly. Let's do something everybody would like, mashed potatoes and apple pie.
Right.
And for us, it's no. Let's do Lunar New Year. Let's recognize that it's celebrated across several cultures. However, while there are similarities, there are differences. Let's choose one lens so that we're not, merging together traditions that are distinct.
Yep.
And within that specificity, right, two things happen. One is the community itself, the word we always get, the word that I love, that's used to describe our celebratory assortments is nostalgic. For this collection, so many Chinese Americans came to me and said, this is so nostalgic. Like that pattern that my grandmother had that. How did you know, right?
Oh,
and
wow.
the sense that, a brand actually, sort of served up an image that is from my memory.
Yeah.
A mainstream brand did
Well,
that.
I think that's important. It's the recognition of, that we're here, right? Not feeling like the other, not feeling like the outsider, not feeling invisible.
Not feeling like even though you're, a major part of the country, your story is now too niche to be specifically told, which it's not. And so we always go specific. But the second thing nostalgia is really my favorite word to describe it. But then we, within that specificity, find this universality. So while it was Chinese Americans that we collaborated with, there was a lot that Korean Americans found in common,
Yeah.
And then there's a lot that other Americans also noticed that felt common, the family gathering, the noise, the role of the mother, the cooking, the arguing, all of that.
Right.
And within the specificity, you find the universality. And I think that's really the future of storytelling.
Well, this is one of the products, right? For Lunar New Year, this pan came in like a red color with some motifs, right? But let's hold it up for the camera, Shiza, so we can just kind of see. It's this steamer kind of pan. And when I looked at it before we started the show, I was like, oh my God, I love this. This is totally what I would need.
So this is I'll describe this pan and then I'll describe the Lunar New Year collection. Okay. So this is from our Essentials collection.
Yep.
It's called, can you see it? It's called the Always Pan. This was the result of a 2-year design exercise with a custom designer where we said, why is the cookware industry always trying to sell you 16 pieces of cookware, 16-piece cookware set?
That's so true.
Why can't you do almost all of it in one pan?
Yeah, so, like a wok for Chinese. I mean, seriously, like a wok, you do everything.
Like
in
a wok, you do everything.
Yeah.
And in a wok, you don't have a flat surface, so you can't really like flip an egg or flip a pancake.
That's correct. Yeah.
So we designed very much inspired by sort of the ethos of a wok, but then we designed it for the modern American kitchen. So this is the right width for you to flip an egg or a pancake, but it's deep enough.
I'm just going to say, for those of you who are just listening, we're actually showing the pan. So if you want to see it, you can go online or watch the video. But it looks like a skillet. It looks sort of like a deep skillet with a lid. And then inside is what's cool.
Yeah. So if you want to see a picture, you can go to our Instagram at Our Place or our website from ourplace.com or watch the video. So it's thin enough, shallow enough to flip an egg or a pancake, deep enough to make soup or pasta. The lid is modular. So at different places, it will let out steam or trap in steam. It also has these beautiful ridges that prevent water from dripping when you lift it up. It has a steamer basket that I love. So
that's my favorite part.
You can, use it to steam.
Yes,
it
this is cool.
It also has a coating that's extremely healthy, so free of all Teflon and PFAs.
Which now we know that Teflon is supposed to be horrible for you.
Right.
Right?
So, if you are...
You gotta chuck all your Teflon pans now.
Well, if we don't want to scare people.
No, I know.
When you buy new cookware, it's good to know. And it's a really great nonstick, so you can really cook without oil if it's something you want to do.
Yeah.
And then this is my favorite feature, which is the Spatula Nest.
The little holding.
So you don't have to get another plate dirty.
Right. I love that too. Very cleverly designed.
It's also just beautiful enough to leave out on your counter.
Yes.
So I leave mine out.
You do? Okay.
Yes. More and more people are leaving it out, and we keep getting spotted on Instagram where someone will take a picture of their home and someone else will say, is that the always pan?
Yeah.
So this is our hero item. It's my favorite. We also have dinnerware and we have hand-painted bowls, plates, hand-blown glasses from Thailand. This is made in a female-owned factory as well.
Oh, wow.
And then we have our Mexican-American collaboration collection. It's our artisan collection from Oaxaca. Really beautiful products. And then for Lunar New Year, we did 4 products. So we did the Always Pan in a bright red to honor the Lunar New Year. And we added in a spruce steamer basket in the middle as well that nests beautifully and cooking chopsticks, which everybody should own because
we all have them. Oh, you have to have those long cooking chopsticks.
I didn't know.
Oh, totally.
It has changed my life.
Oh, no. You have to.
We added in a cleaver, which is, the Chinese cleaver.
I saw a picture of that. That looks like definitely a major cleaver.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's really high quality. It's great for meat, but it's great for vegetables. It's kind of intended to be for everything. And I feel like Chinese cleavers are so underrated as a knife. So I've been really excited to expose the world to them. That's not something
you will hear every day. Chinese cleavers are very underrated.
They always talk about Japanese knives, which are fantastic.
That's
I love
true.
Japanese knives.
Yeah.
But China has a rich history of craftsmanship of knives.
Yeah. I'm going to say something really morbid. When I lived in Hong Kong as a journalist, every so often you would hear about these chopping deaths.
Oh my God.
Someone would get chopped to death and they would use those cleavers.
That's horrible.
I know. I just totally brought this down, but reminds me whenever I see those cleavers, it reminds me of those.
Well, our cleaver is not sharp enough to be used for hurting anyone, but it can be used to make
really wonderful food.
Yes, really wonderful food. And then the last 2 items we had are these 2 platters that are a modern twist to a classic. So it's that blue and white pattern you see in a lot of homes and restaurants. It's very nostalgic.
Yep.
And we worked with a Chinese American artist to update it, sort of make it modern and playful. And so with these 2 platters. And so it's really this gorgeous celebratory assortment that pays tribute to a culture, but also to how a culture evolves in diaspora and what it means to celebrate Lunar New Year in America rather than in the home country.
And for the new younger generations to appreciate and carry on.
Absolutely.
With a modern twist. So I love that. I mean, it's just, it is something that at first glance, you're like, wait a minute, why is this activist who's the co-founder of the Malala Fund now into, cookware? But now that you explain the storytelling and, the carrying on the tradition, and exposing, the outside world more, the mainstream to these ideas. I mean, it does make sense. It really does. It's a really lovely way to kind of extend your activism.
Everything that you do is an opportunity to make a difference, And I think that the sense that you cannot make a difference while building a business is something that we have to fight because it absolves businesses of responsibility. This pan, this cookware employs hundreds of people, workers, craftspeople. It has an impact on the environment.
Yeah, I love that.
Right? The packaging we ship it in, that's an opportunity. The culture at our workplace. everything that we're doing is either making the world better or worse.
Yeah.
And if we can show people how to run business in a more ethical way, then we can transform the world, because trillions are traded in the financial markets every day. Nonprofits are just a fraction of that. And while I have so much respect for nonprofit work, and it's been a big part of my background, I think sometimes it becomes an excuse, a way of distracting people from the role of business. So my hope is that, the social justice leaders of today and tomorrow will be building startups that make the world better, and being really thoughtful about how their startups lift people out of poverty and share stories that shift bias and empower women and girls.
Yeah. And we have to be willing to speak up. Absolutely. When we see something that's not right, or we want to elevate something that's really good, we have to use our voices in whatever form that comes in. And so whether it's through business like you're doing, whether it's through this podcast that we're trying to do here, that's the way to get the message out, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Shiza, it's such a pleasure to meet you and talk to you about your career and what you've done up to now. And you're still so young. I can't imagine what more you're going to do, but I look forward to continuing to watch what you do and the way you're making this world a better place. You're an inspiration for sure.
Thank you. So are you. And I admire your career and your voice and the change that you're bringing with your storytelling.
Thank you.
And it's a privilege to be a small part of it.
Thank you so much. All right. We'll see you soon. And that is the Mei Lee Show for this time. Thank you so much for listening and watching. We'll see you next time. All right. Have a good one.